Gerrit Hofstede, a Dutch social psychologist, once said, "Culture is the collective programming of the mind which distinguishes the member of one group or category of people from another. In other words, culture tells people who they are, which behaviors are appropriate and which are not. Our culture shapes the way we think, behave, interact, and make judgments. But why is an understanding of culture critical in today's context? As the business world becomes more global, companies will work with other companies from different countries, and employees will encounter other employees from different cultures. Such interaction can result in misunderstanding or tensions if not properly addressed. It is therefore important for organizations and their employees to gain deep insights into differences across cultures to better prepare themselves for cross-cultural situations. One theory can be employed to help. Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory, developed by Gerrit Hofstede, is a framework used to understand the differences in culture across countries and how businesses are conducted in different cultures. After having been refined through several books, the 6 dimensions of the theory were finalized in Hofstede's latest book, Cultures and Organization: Software of the Mind. These 6 dimensions include: first, power distance index, individualism versus collectivism; uncertainty avoidance index, masculinity versus femininity; long-term orientation versus short-term orientation; and lastly, restraint versus indulgence. In this mini research, we would like to focus on the masculinity versus femininity dimension, specifically how it is manifested in the Vietnamese work environment. To begin with, masculinity and femininity should not be confused with a man and a woman. Masculinity is the trait that emphasizes ambition, acquisition of wealth, and differentiate gender roles. On the other hand, femininity stresses caring and nurturing behaviors, environmental awareness, and more fluid gender roles. Specifically, according to Hofstede, masculinity stands for a society where social gender roles are clearly distinct. Men are supposed to be assertive, tough, and focused on material success. Women are supposed to be more modest, tender, and concerned with the quality of life. However, femininity stands for a society where social gender roles overlap. Both men and women are supposed to be modest, tender, and concerned with the quality of life. Furthermore, masculinity sees society at large as more competitive. Femininity sees society at large as more consensus-oriented. In the following part, we'll have an overview of our mini research. The topic of our research is employees' working attitudes at English language centers in Vietnam, Hanoi, as seen from Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Next is the objectives of our research. According to Hofstede's insights, Vietnam scores 40 on the masculinity dimension, and it does consider a feminine society. However, whether this figure is accurate to today's Vietnamese culture needs consideration. This mini research aims to explicitly study how Hofstede's masculinity versus femininity dimension is manifested in the Vietnamese workplace, more specifically English language centers in Hanoi, and to determine if they are more feminine or masculine in nature. In terms of the scope of our mini research, first, the focus. The research will mainly assess how different traits of masculine and feminine societies are displayed in ELCs in Hanoi. The participants include teacher, teacher assistant, and staff at Hanoi's English language centers. They are female, male, and other, and all above 18 years old. The results of the mini research will be analyzed based on the following theoretical framework, which consists of 5 different high masculinity and low masculinity traits in the workplace stated by Hofstede in 2001. And lastly is the data collection. For this mini research, we have conducted 3 interviews with 6 questions each and 1 survey with 10 questions. The question designed for the interviews and survey intend to assess how different characteristics of masculine and low masculine cultures are manifested in Hanoi English language centers.
First, about the interviews, we questioned 3 individuals working in some English language centers in Hanoi, 2 women and 1 male, all between the ages of 20 and 21, respectively Phạm Phương Hoa, Ninh Quang Phúc, and Trịnh Thị Mỹ Lệ. Here is their self-introduction.
Bạn có thể mô tả sơ qua về trung tâm tiếng Anh của bạn được không?
Vâng, mình hiện đang làm trợ giảng tại một trung tâm tiếng Anh khá là có tiếng ở Hà Nội với quy mô là hơn 300 học viên và với đội ngũ giáo viên và nhân viên thì có khoảng 60 người ạ.
Hiện tại thì mình làm ở một trung tâm luyện thi tiếng Anh ở vị trí là giáo viên dạy chính. Trung tâm của mình khá là nhỏ thôi. Nếu tính cả học viên và nếu tính cả giáo viên và trợ giảng thì có khoảng 10 người, còn học viên thì tầm khoảng 45 người.
Mình thì làm trợ giảng tiếng Anh trong một trung tâm có quy mô cũng tầm trung thôi, và theo mình nhớ thì chúng mình có khoảng 20 người, tính cả giáo viên, cả giảng viên với cả nhân viên văn phòng khác nữa.
Survey report. We also conducted a survey, which generated a total of 72 responses in the end. The majority of the responses are between the ages of 18 and 22, with 1/3 of the respondents being older than 22. It consists of 46 females, 25 males, and 1 other. Now, let's take a closer look at the data we have gathered through the interviews and surveys. The first factor is the wage gap, with the question, are female and male employees at your center paid equally for the same job? If not, what is the average wage gap between the two genders? Firstly, in terms of the gender pay gap, most of the respondents to the survey, or more than 80%, report that the wage differential between genders does not exist in the English language centers. Likewise, our interviewees see no difference in payment between the male and female employees. According to them, they are paid based on their capacity or working hours, not gender.
Theo mình quan sát thì ở trung tâm mình thì họ trả lương theo năng lực chứ không phải là trả lương theo giới tính. Ví dụ là có một nữ giáo viên dạy lớp này, lớp ví dụ là lớp giao tiếp level 1 đi, thì có một giáo viên nam cũng dạy một lớp tương tự thì họ được trả lương như nhau, và không có lý do gì mà họ được mức lương tốt hơn cả khi mà họ cùng làm công việc giống như nhau.
On the other hand, the group of respondents who agrees that there is a wage gap between the two genders only account for a little above 18%. However, the wage gap is not too large, reported to be under 10% by the majority from this group, 70.8%. From the obtained data, it can be stated that in Hanoi's English language centers, there is a minor differential between the salaries of men and women. This corresponds with the first trait of a feminine society based on Hofstede framework, smaller wage gap between genders. In contrast to high masculine cultures, which often witness a huge pay gap between female and male workers, low masculine cultures work to close that gap.
The second question is, are there many female managers? According to the survey result, more than 40% of English language center employees report that the majority of their superiors are female. For nearly 35% of the respondents, women take up about half of the higher positions. Only a small proportion of employees is under the supervision of a few female managers. Similarly, one of our interviewees reveals that most of her managers, from the chief executive to the head of the department, are women.
Vâng, Như bạn cũng biết thì là ở môi trường giáo dục thì là hầu hết là các nữ giới, và ở trung tâm mình cũng không ngoại lệ. Từ các sếp lớn đến các trưởng phòng thì đều là nữ.
Thus, it can be concluded that English language centers in Hanoi employ a large number of women in high positions, which is in line with the second characteristic of a feminine society displayed in the workplace. More women in management. In low masculine cultures, resistance against women entering higher jobs tends to be weaker than in high masculine cultures. That leads us to the third question in our survey. What is the leadership style of your managers? Regarding the leadership of their managers, nearly two-thirds of the respondents, 61.1%, are overseen by task-oriented employers who prioritize the step-by-step solution to meet certain goals and are less concerned with catering to employees. One of our interviewees who feels the same way about her manager says that their bosses are someone that sticks to the rules and rarely makes exceptions.
Vâng, sếp mình thì là một người khá là nghiêm khắc và thường chỉ nhìn vào kết quả của công việc thôi ạ.
On the contrary, nearly 40% of employees describe their employer's leadership style as relationship tasked. These are the leaders that focus on the satisfaction, motivation, and the general well-being of the team members. They usually attempt to create a non-competitive work environment and encourage collaboration.
Thực ra mà nói thì giám đốc trung tâm chỗ mình cảm thấy là rất là công bằng và nghiêm túc. Tức là sếp cũng không quá cứng nhắc đâu, vẫn xem xét tình huống và mới đưa ra quyết định cuối cùng.
According to the findings, it can be said that Hanoi's English language centers lean towards a task-oriented management style, which is relatively close to the third attribute of high masculine cultures represented in the workplace. In these societies, managers are expected to be decisive, stern, and assertive, opposed to employers in feminine societies, who are expected to use intuition and dealing with feelings.
Moving to the way employees deal with conflicts and their professional relationships at English language centers, more than 90% of the survey employees say that they and their colleagues would compromise and seek peace instead of trying to win when dealing with a conflict. Furthermore, over 80% of the respondents depict the employee relations within the organizations as cooperative one. Our interviewees report the similar way they and their coworkers resolve a dispute, which normally involves negotiating and striving for consensus rather than denying other opinions and fighting for their own arguments.
Thì thấy dân ngoại ngữ chúng mình rất là thân thiện. Công việc của mình thì chủ yếu là giúp đỡ nhau chứ chẳng có tranh giành hoặc là ganh đua gì. Thì chúng mình cũng ít khi có mâu thuẫn lắm. Nếu mà có thì cũng kiểu mỗi người nhường nhau một tí, hay là ai sai thì người đó sẽ mua cho người kia một ly coffee để bù, là xong chuyện.
From the result above, it can be inferred that English language centers in Hanoi are collaborative working environments where employee resolution of conflicts is to compromise and negotiate. This closely corresponds with the first trait of feminine societies displayed in the workplace. In low masculine cultures, workers prioritize the maintenance of an amicable atmosphere. When it comes to a dispute, they are more likely to come up with a win-win situation, in contrast to employees in high masculine cultures, who are usually competitive. The next question is, how often do you feel stressed at work? It is clear from the survey result that almost every English language center's employees is under pressure at work, from a lesser to greater extent, while more than 50% of the respondents report that their job stress is occasional. Up to a third of the total feel frequently stressed at work. In terms of the causes of pressure in the work environment, The prominent reason for stress were reported to be the volume of work, accounting for more than 90%. In addition, the nature and responsibilities for the job are driving force for pressure with nearly 60%. This is also reflected by our interviewees who reveal that they are frequently stressed due to the fact that their teaching profession involves daily contact with students and parents, which causes them anxiety.
Mình cũng khá thường xuyên bị stress ấy, nhưng mà mình nghĩ là bây giờ ngành này nào cũng sẽ stress thế thôi. Nguyên nhân chính là do khối lượng công việc quá nhiều này. Thêm nữa là đối với cái nghề giáo này của chúng mình thì làm việc với con người rất là nhiều, tức là kiểu như là vừa phải chú ý rất nhiều thứ này và phải còn vừa dạy này, vừa dỗ nữa.
Therefore, it can be conducted that employees in Hanoi's English language centers are likely experience stress on a regular basis. Compared to the given framework, this is in line with the last characteristic of high masculine cultures represented in the workplace, higher job stress. In masculine cultures, employees are susceptible to stress at high level as longer working hours are required. On the contrary, family workplaces prefer shorter working hours, thus lower work stress is seen among employees.
So we have already go through from a theory to our data analysis, and now let's move to the last part where we will summarize the survey results, voice our critical opinion, and then present a few suggestions for the intercultural communication in Vietnamese workplaces. On the screen is a table summarizing the information gathered from our interviews and survey. Compare the obtained information to the mentioned theoretical framework. The following conclusions can be drawn. English language centers in Hanoi display three traits of low masculine or feminine societies stated in the framework, which are smaller wage gap between genders, more women in management, and resolution of conflicts through compromise and negotiation. These workplaces also feature two characteristics of high masculine societies, which are managers are expected to be decisive, stern, and assertive, and higher job stress. Now let's shift to our critical opinion. The results of survey and interviews our group has conducted are accurate to our point of view and personal experience. Several feminine features are recognized in our own English language centers. Firstly, we receive a relatively equal amount of salaries for the same working hour and qualification regardless of gender. It means that there is rarely a big gender wage gap in our centers. Secondly, we perceive that the managers, a majority of whom are female, tend to seek consensus and deal with sentiments rather than being overly tough or decisive when it comes to managing, which helps us to feel more at ease at work. Another trait of low masculinity that we can realize in our workplace is that conflicts are more likely to be solved via negotiation and collaboration than by fighting or denial. However, we believe that employees in some English language centers are still put under high job stress as a result of long working hours and other factors. This is a feature of high masculinity seen in ELCs. In conclusion, we likewise hold the view that Vietnamese workplaces, specifically English language centers, are a feminine working environment. However, there still exists some high masculinity traits demonstrated in the workplace. After having examined the manifestation of this masculinity and femininity dimension through a survey, we would suggest certain approaches for companies to operate in an intercultural communication context. We believe workers should learn carefully in advance about the country's managing style, stress level, or relationship among colleagues. For instance, gender discrimination in wages or positions rarely exists. In female, even outnumber males in the workforce and in high positions. Hence, males, particularly those from countries of heavy gender prejudice, should prepare not to be treated more kindly than their female colleagues. The same attention needed paying to is working manners. Conflicts and heated arguments should be avoided in most situations, since the nature of Vietnamese people and cultures is to respect a harmonious environment and peace. The occasional dispute is, however, still acceptable as long as it does not result in others' loss of faith. Now I'd like to wrap up our discussion by briefly going through our main content. We have presented four main parts: the introduction, which helps states cultural dimension and our focus, masculinity and femininity. Next is the overview of our mini research, where we talked about its topic, objectives, scopes, and the collection of data. Then we reported and analyzed the results, and finally finished our presentation with a summary, critical opinions, and some suggestions for intercultural communication in Vietnam. On behalf of Group 4, thanks a lot for your attention and wish you a happy day.